every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just a, here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I am really excited to once again have the opportunity to talk to the great Pat Mills. Pat, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you too. Hi, John.
Congratulations, man. I have been watching your blog for a long time, waiting for the debut of SpaceWarp, and it came out earlier this year. And you've got a new edition that's coming out to the stores soon as well, correct?
That's correct. Probably September, and it's also being distributed by Diamond, so it should get into the American shops. And the important thing, I think, is this is a cheaper newsstand edition. Dare I say it's a pocket money edition. It's half the price of the original edition, and it has extra pages in color, and that's all really a reflection of how well the first version did, that we could afford to say, okay, we'll go out and we'll do this cheaper edition, because we want to reach younger readers, and they haven't got as much money as we have, you know.
Sure, absolutely, man. Well, again, you know, you were one of the main creative forces behind 2000 AD. This has a very similar format as well. I mean, here's the kind of table of contents, if you will. But I'm really excited. I've always appreciated the format of the British the weeklies, and the fact that you guys would put so much content into these books. And really, God, a 4-page story can really have a lot of story in it, and truly, you guys are masters at that. And I really, honestly, I've always been like, wow, and just and also the fact that you've cultivated a group of artists here that really are great and dynamic. I mean, this is a long time. When did the idea of SpaceWarp first occur to you, and how long has it been gestating to the point now where it's out?
Well, I think it must have been about 2.5 years ago, roughly, and I'd been sort of thinking about it, and I kind of featured it in a novel, the idea of a kind of fictional version of 2000 AD, so it could kind of tell a dark history of not just 2000 AD, but various other comics. It's a series I did with Kevin O'Neill, or we did the first volume together, Read 'em and Weep. And volume 1 was Serial Killer. And then as I got on to volume 2, and I started thinking about this fictional SpaceWarp, I thought, well, you know what? I can actually do this for real. And I think the thing about it is it's emphatically not a nostalgia comic as such. It only draws on the past in so much as arguably the present is not as powerful as the golden age. I mean, that's true for all comics, isn't it? We always look back. I mean, what's the matter with us? We always say, oh, yeah, they're not so good today. Well, I want to tap into that golden age, which is always yesterday. It's never today. No one's ever going to say, hey, the golden age is here. You know?
You're right.
So it's got that energy from the early 2000 ADs, but it's aiming at take a deep gulp here, Generation Z, in as much as, you know, aiming at that elusive younger audience, which it's my understanding that just as we've lost them in the UK, it's my understanding that for a large part, you've also lost them in the US.
Agreed.
And I think for similar reasons, you know, complicated stories, but ultimately, you know, everyone grows up with a comic and, hey, we forgot the 11-year-olds, we forgot the 12-year-olds. And I don't know what it is about me, but I actually like writing for that audience. And I don't think I'm alone in that respect, you know, from J.K. Rowling downwards. You know, there is something about appealing to that audience who, to my way of thinking, are actually more critical. I mean, as we get older, we get a bit more tolerant, you know what I mean? But a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, if they don't like something, they show no mercy.
That's true. Yeah.
So and they're not as polite either. So I wanted something to hit that audience, and therefore it also reflects, if you like, the mechanismos of today. So it's not you know, it's not living and breathing in the 1970s. It's 2021. You've got iPads. You've got you know, influencers and all those kind of things, which you know, I think actually have a great deal of potential and are now having a lot of fun with. And half the problem, you know, is that you have to plan for, you know, because these stories are short, so you might think, oh, well, it's only 6 or 8 pages, you know, move on to the next one. But you're actually planning for like maybe 6 issues ahead, because if you don't, that's when you're going to paint yourself into a corner. So you have to think ahead, and I'm thinking, wow, this particular hero, Hellbreaker, he's escaped from hell, and he's a major influencer. He has huge followings on Instagram, and I just think of the fun possibilities on that. And
that's great.
Also, yeah.
So you're incorporating things like social media into the stories.
Oh, hugely.
Absolutely. That's excellent, man. No, I get it. And you're right about the younger audience. You know, they're getting served in the YA realm as far as, I think, slice of life stories and things like that, and certainly fantasy. I don't know how much science fiction. And I'll be honest, obviously being an older person myself, I mean, you know, I'm not reading what the YA crowd is reading, but I do think that, yeah, they are. I mean, they certainly love the media that's coming out that has all the high tech that now comes with television and film, and I do think again that your stories are reflective of that. God, I tried really hard to clip pages from my Kindle version, but it kept cropping the top and bottom of the page, so I didn't want to half-ass it. We see Hellbreaker there. This is the lineup, and I do want to talk about all the various characters that you're introducing. So, is it over 60 pages? How long is the first issue here?
I think it's good God. What did I think it's 69. Wow. I should know. You've caught me on the hop there. I've got all these things written down, and but yeah, it's a
full boat, regardless.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, 6 stories, and I see what you mean about. So if there is a particular one, I can always. I don't know if you can get that there.
There we go.
But we can always refer to a particular. You know, I can turn the pages to
marvelous.
not quite the same, I know, but
no, but
Neil Johnson has told us it's 69 pages.
Well,
So,
and indeed,
thank you, Neil. You helped me out of a jam there.
And Neil, based on our opening comments here, has gone out and bought a copy. So that's
brilliant.
The system works, as I always say when I get that feedback from people, and they go, "I never would have bought that book if I hadn't heard them or watched them on Word Balloon." So I'm like, "Hey, that's fantastic. That's the best compliment I can get." And I'm helping, I'm helping my guests out. So that's terrific. So let's talk about. Oh wait, here we got another comment here. Hi, John and Pat. First heard about SpaceWarp from the great chat with David Macho. Yes, indeed. I love David. And again, in Shift Comics, how did the partnership with Shift Comics come about? Good question.
Hey, well, Shift is part of Get My Comics, which is the distributor in the UK, and they're linked in with Diamond. And so they were able to help us with all kinds of things, because it's actually, well, for a start, Shift managed to get us into the newsstand, because otherwise it's not impossible for us to do it. But we're actually a one-man, one-woman operation.
Yeah,
my wife Lisa and myself. So for two people to do everything could be quite daunting. So to have that burden, if you like, taken off us, and so Shift, get it into the newsstand. Now that used to be a really difficult thing, but it's always been an objective of mine, because obviously that's where you're going to meet most kids. Some kids will go into comic book shops, but not all. And what you want are those browsers, and of course you also want people who are just kind of just looking. They could be any age, right? And on the newsstand edition, it actually has which will be it's a different cover.
Okay.
By Charles Gillespie, who is a great artist, and I think we'll see more and more of him in forthcoming years. So it's got my name on it, Pat Mills's SpaceWarp. Really, for people who remember me from 2000 AD or whatever.
Sure.
So that's where Shift comes in, and it's also meant that we can do other editions. So we've got the high quality edition from Diamond, and we've also got the cheap newsstand edition coming out. And it's surprising. Well, I was laughing, when you said how we're very good at condensing stuff, and we are. It's not because we have any magic tricks up our sleeves. It's just you guys in the States, you have, what do you have, like 21, 22 pages for a comic strip, right? So you can relax a little. We can't. In other words, so we're so used to the idea of a 6-page story.
Yeah.
And so we get used to the intensity of it. And I thought to myself, when I was doing the newsstand edition, I thought, well, I'll have a 1-page inside story to introduce it in color, to introduce this new newsstand version. I thought, 1 page, that should be easy. And I'd forgotten it. Take it from me, a 1-page story, because you've got to put so much into it. In other words, the action starts late and finishes, as it were, right on the button. And so for a normal story, I'd be thinking, oh my God, I've just worked out a 6 or 8 page story, and I've chopped the beginning off and chopped the end off, and you've got a 1-page story. And I think it's something that younger readers especially like. Some older readers said to me, yeah, we like SpaceWarp, but you could go at an easier pace. And I'm thinking, well, if you've got to make a choice between a 14-year-old and a 34-year-old, I'm afraid it's got to be, for me, it's got to be the 14-year-old. And the 14-year-old, I think it's something to do with a slightly, what should we say, a shorter attention span.
Indeed, yes.
Particularly with the digital age.
Agreed.
So, I mean, one boy we showed it to, In fact, two of them, they were brothers, and they both made the same point. They said, yeah, we like it, but we don't want those feature pages. We just brush over those. We just want to get straight into the story.
Interesting, sure.
You know, so you it's a balancing act of trying to keep everyone happy. But as I say, my first loyalty it is to that youth audience, because I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like James Bond. I mean, when I first saw James Bond, I was, what, 14 or something, and I still enjoy it at my advanced years today. And it's the same for all of us. But if it starts being too old and too sophisticated, I don't think, you know, you wouldn't get the 14-year-olds watching it. I'm not even sure they're allowed to, are they? I don't know if it's got the right age group, but anyway, I was watching it at 14. So
no, me too. Well, I mean, even earlier, honestly, I also think that the pre-credit Bond quick adventure sequence was such a smart thing that when they started doing it with, you know, with, well, I suppose with really From Russia with Love had that opening where they faked us out with the killing of Bond, but Goldfinger with that mini adventure where he comes out of the water, he's in the wetsuit, he unzips it, he's got the tux underneath it and everything, and immediately you're off to the races. And I've always loved that about the Bond things. But honestly, here in the States, as you say, the writers here get used to the idea of a lot more pages. And it really, to me, seems like it's much more harder to do a story in 6 pages or 8 pages. And it really is a skill that only a handful, I think, of the American writers initially had. But now I see DC and Marvel toying with anthologies where they are doing a ton of 8-page stories. And it's great to see that the younger writers are actually doing it. And I mean, honestly, it's just, I find myself finishing, I'm like, wow, that was only 8 pages, but there was a ton of story in there. And there's no room for BS. You really have to
which there is otherwise. And I mean, it's also, I think, a reflection of if you're being reasonably well paid, and let's hope those guys on Marvel and DC are, because that's often the crunch. If you think, my God, I've just worked out this entire, you know, this 8-page story. Now let me see, how many days has it taken me? You know, and so yeah, it has to be economic. But it's just reminded me that before Marvel and with the Warren era and the EC era,
yes,
I mean, you guys were the masters of these short stories,
right?
You know, these Blazing Combat and all those kind of things. I think
creepy and eerie. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like we were out there on a limb. I think we were following it. We were following on that tradition. There was an earlier tradition in British comics, which I think was a cul-de-sac, which was, well, it became a cul-de-sac for the most part. 3-page stories. And some of those were pretty ropey, because it's just like any kind of story. If you're not being paid properly, or if the editor's heart's not in it, it gets abused. And so what would happen is you would have these terrible stories where the hero would get out of one cliffhanger, you know, he'd fall off a cliff and spend 1.5 pages hanging onto a branch or something.
Right.
And then the next situation where he's falling into the river and, you know, sharks or something, or some kind of piranha or whatever are about to attack him. And so that's not storytelling. That's just lurching from cliffhanger to cliffhanger. But yeah, no, I mean, I you know, I'm hoping that some of these, SpaceWarp in particular, does sufficiently well that I can take some time out to really look at EC and all those things. Because I think there's things I can learn from that. You know, the structure was often so good. And, you know, to press those notes, you know, I'm thinking of Archie Goodwin's work in particular.
Totally. Great writer. Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah. And great editor, too, for that matter. Well, you're right. And in fact, a lot of your peers on the States side, like Walter Simonson and people like that, when I speak to them, their first assignments were literally 3- and 5-page stories and the like, back in the 70s when they were getting going. But yeah, I don't know, somewhere along the way in the 80s, or I mean, they tried the weekly experiment in the late 80s and early 90s. It's interesting how the trend bounces back and forth, I think, from the States to what you guys were doing, you know, in England and stuff. And you'd kind of get, and of course the Japanese and you know, giant anthologies they put out and everything too.
Yeah, I'm always in awe of that until I hear that they can be a bit sweatshop, shall we say, the conditions under which they're produced. Because previously I was thinking, oh my God, this is brilliant. But then when you hear that they're really having very long, you know, it's a bit tough for them. So, you know, my heart goes out to them as a fellow creator, you know.
Well, and it seemed like SpaceWarp was your response to the people behind 2000 AD in terms of, hey, you wanted to, you know, make something of your own, but also, you know, be fair to your collaborators and stuff and give them a good opportunity, not only from an exposure standpoint, but also monetarily.
Yeah.
Oh, he might be frozen. Pat is frozen. I hope you can hear me, Pat.
That's the thing.
Hopefully it'll clear up, everybody. Don't worry.
It's yeah, I'm back. You hear me okay? No, doesn't sound like.
Okay, all right. Now you're coming back, Pat. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Start again,
right,
please.
It's just a 1 second delay there. Yeah, it's creator owned, and it means that everybody concerned gets a slice of the pie. Now, what that I think will mean is over a period of, I mean, I've already, you know, paid out royalties already, but what I'm hoping is, and that in, shall we say, a year's time, as sales continue, that we will, even at that early point, you know, go beyond what they might have earned elsewhere. But certainly in the long run, that's the thing. And you have to also take the long view and say, well, with an anthology like this, the way it's set up, and with subsequent issues that will come out in the fullness of time, you know, more money comes in, and it takes a while for everything to get really known. And of course, we've had COVID, which probably hasn't helped us. It's probably helped us digitally. I think we sold more digital copies of SpaceWarp than we would otherwise. And I think it's probably been good for the Amazon edition. But in terms of face-to-face with the audience and conventions and shops and so on, we're still not back to normal. We will maybe, we think that conventions and things will start kicking off in the autumn, but you can never be sure, because all they've got to say is, hey, there's a new variation and masks back on and all this nonsense.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, believe me, man, we're just as worried on this side of the ocean as well. Hey, Dean Haspiel chiming in, and it says, big ups to Pat for rocking the anthology format. Creators need more anthologies to flex new ideas while honing others. Agreed. So
yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing I think about it being creator owned is that the artists get very involved with the characters, and that always shows itself in the storytelling. In other words, they're not just drawing the thing, they're not just work for hire, it's their character as much as mine. So you find characters starting to take off. And I think previously in British comics, where you can really see it is with Kevin O'Neill and myself. You know, when we were working on things, we were so locked into the characters like Nemesis and later on Martial Law and so on. And I think we have the same possibilities here with SpaceWarp. Yeah, these characters, you know, from a long-term point of view, I mean, they're all designed to be around for a very long time.
I can tell. Absolutely, man. And this is great. Aaron, I'm going to get a couple more comments, and then let's talk about some of the features and the details of them. Partworks Comics Reader picked up the book plate from GMC. What's GMC? Do you know?
Get My Comics.
Okay, there you go. Very good.
Yeah.
happy to double dip on the re-release along with the Brawler special to show support. What's the Brawler special?
Well, apart from the newsstand, it's also being presented as a package with another comic called Brawler. So in other words, they're bagged together.
Sure.
And I think this is another idea of Get My Comics, which is probably a very good one, because it means that Brawler's audience, which is arguably a kind of strong fan audience, and then SpaceWarp's audience, which has a strong fan element, I hope, but also has a separate kind of audience. They're kind of, you know, combined together. And I think a lot of fans really want to see, you know, these kind of productions work well. So that's the story behind that one.
Excellent. You know, all right, before we get into the details of these features in SpaceWarp, I do want to address some fan questions. And the Vasic says that your collaboration and all really shows in martial law. Can you talk about the genesis for martial law? I would love to hear the origins of that. Pat, that was my first Pat Mills book, was martial law back in the 80s. And I adored it and appreciated the parody and what you guys were saying. And really your attitude towards, you know, American superheroes. So,
well,
very funny.
Well, Kevin came up with the image of martial law, and I think he also came up with the name. We've been talking about doing a story for, in fact, Archie Goodwin had said to us to do a story for Marvel Epic, and I think I came up with a kind of crime thriller plot, but it wasn't specifically relating. It may not even have been called martial law at that point, but it certainly didn't have that look. And then Kevin came up with this design, and I thought, my God, who is this guy? I mean, you know, who is he? And I thought, and obviously, my thought, just to briefly take you through the genesis here, my thought process went like this. I thought, well, he's a superhero. And then I thought, yeah, but I hate superheroes. How can I write this character? I mean, he looks sort of like a cross between Judge Dredd and a superhero.
Sure.
And then I thought, well, yeah, but what if he's a superhero hunter? And so I rather nervously rang Kevin O'Neill up, and I said, well, look, you know, how would you feel if you know, he was a superhero hunter? And of course, Kevin immediately ran with the ball and added another whole strata and said, yeah, what if he's an army vet and this, that, and the other? And even though I think he actually quite likes superheroes himself, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I think the funniest and the cruelest lines in martial law, I would say there's a good chance that Kevin's rather than mine. It comes from some faraway place. I'm thinking, my God, that's really funny, and what some would say a little mean-spirited, but that's okay.
No. And Vasic says, I guess this was his first encounter with you as well. It blew his mind at the time. Honestly, man, I love and forgive the generalization, but I love the British attitude towards American comics, both the ones that enjoy writing them and still find joy and their perspective on telling a straightforward superhero story, but also people like yourself that are like, all right, not interested, don't care, happy to make fun of it, and that's great because we need it. I mean, again, you know, hey, I've always been a fan of good parody, and you know, certainly, you know, your side of the ocean has been responsible for a lot of great stuff going back to Beyond the Fringe and, you know, the early Python stuff. And you know, hey, everything should be, you should be able to, as you guys say, take a piss at it. And that's fine. I welcome it. And again, martial law was always very fun.
It's something we do tend to do in comics particularly. But I have to say that the sharpest and the cruelest humor, which I adore, is American. Curb Your Enthusiasm, you know.
Sure.
I mean,
Good.
You know,
Yeah.
but somehow I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I can see, you know, that kind of Curb Your Enthusiasm humor doesn't find its way into comics, whereas or into American comics, which is, well, it's probably good for us as Brits because there's a vacuum waiting to be filled.
Well, you know, honestly, recently, only in the last couple of years, there's a company called Ahoy, and people, old comic vets like Tom Peyer and Stuart Moore are there, and they're really, it's a really great line of humor comics, and there are definitely superhero parodies there. They have a character called Dragonfly Man, and the series is called The Wrong Earth, and it's essentially what if Frank Miller's Batman and the Adam West Batman switched Earths accidentally, and all of a sudden the virtuous Adam West is facing the grim and gritty Frank Miller world, and the grim and gritty Frank Miller Batman is suddenly in the clean-cut, you know, world of Batman television and stuff. And it's very well done, and it's very funny and really terrific. And I mean, that's just one example. And yeah, I mean, there really are this stream of newer writers that are finally finding a platform to do humor. I mean, you know, again,
that's great. That is so good, because I mean, when I was a teenager, I mean, I grew up on Mad Magazine, and,
sure.
and so I always saw that. I mean, Mad Magazine, particularly, and going back probably still to this day, but it's very slick, very, very polished. You had all those great characters like, you know, Don Martin
Yes.
doing things and so on, but they were all really at the top of their game. So yeah, it's great to know that, because I think for a while, you know, you had those kind of mainstream superheroes and the kind of what you might call the Vertigo stream taking over from this what I would call seditious humor. So it's great to know that it's alive and well, and it's obviously, you know, this new generation will, I'm sure, amaze us and make us laugh at comics again. That'll be good.
Are you content just primarily doing SpaceWarp and your own creator-owned stuff, or would you entertain, you know, publisher jobs, not necessarily DC or Marvel? Frankly, I am thinking of Ahoy, because honestly, I think your humor would be a great fit for them, frankly.
Well, I didn't know about Ahoy, so I will have to check it out. And that's spelled AHOY?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I mean,
I will have to have a look. Well, you know, the frustrating thing is that where art is concerned, you know, I can sort of bring on an artist, right? So I've got these 6 guys who are doing SpaceWarp, and they're all pretty cool artists to begin with. But, you know, to my way of thinking, they're the Mick McMahon, the Kevin O'Neill, and the Brian Bolland, and the Dave Gibbons of this era. In other words, they're new artists. They're already fairly established, and this is taking them on a stage. So that takes time, but it's finite time. But storytelling-wise, I would love to pass my stories on, 6 of them, on to other writers. But the model that I think I've seen this happen in the past, and it's been disastrous, I would say, for the most part, because the writer goes off on a tangent or thinks if he's taken over a character that he can take it in another direction. And the model I'm using is one that's very familiar in television, which is where you have the you know, the writer creator starts something, he writes maybe the 2nd episode and maybe the last episode of, shall we say, a 6 episode series or something like that.
Sure.
And then he gives the tram lines for the ones in between. And I think that's the model I have to adapt. And I suspect I mean, I have got writers in mind, but I think it would be quite a new departure for them, because I think the tradition in Britain is, well, you know, when you take over a character, you do what you like. No, it's because the reader thinks of these stories this way. And if they notice a variation, they are not happy. Unless, I mean, you know, it's asking too much of a new writer to say, go in a new direction and be better. You've got to stick to the formula or the principles of storytelling that have been established. And once that's gone, so what I'm saying in a long-winded way is, if I can get those writers up and running, and it will probably be on SpaceWarp 3, I think. I did think about it on SpaceWarp 2, and I'll start the process then. But I think it's much harder to, if you like, train up a new writer. But if I succeed, hey, it means I'm back to being free again. You know, I could say, okay, we've got all these great writers taken over from me. This is looking a long way down the line. You're right. Let's have a look at Ahoy, or let's have a look at something else, because that is the problem that I've got. I think since I've been self-publishing with SpaceWarp and novels and so on, they're all backing up. Everyone's being very polite at the moment, for the most part, and saying, "We'll wait, we'll wait."
Well, you're worth the wait, man. I understand. Absolutely. Yeah, Dean's got the phrase. Sounds like Pat wants to be the showrunner of this anthology. Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Dean. That's the word I was grasping for. Yeah, showrunner. Yeah, I think that's a good role model, because when I think back, I can't think of any other successful way of doing these things. And it works for television for the most part. I think most of these showrunner things, that provided the original writers got it right, you know, you just follow those tracks. And in that sense, it's also good because you can concentrate on the dialogue and the you know, the finer points, rather than thinking, oh my God, I've got to plot this. Yeah. You know, you think, well, Pat's worked out the basic plot. You know, this guy's gonna, you know, knock over a bank or whatever it is. Okay, so how do I make that? How do I make that funny, or how do I make that sad? And then the other thing, of course, I do, which I very much do with artists, and I used to do with writers, and I think I'm going to be able to do it this time around. The writers I have in mind are all guys with interesting backgrounds. So I want them to sort of bring in their knowledge into you know, they know things about, what should we say, crime, for example, that I wouldn't know. Okay. I mean, and that makes such a difference. I mean, for instance, when I did Accident Man with Tony Skinner, he was some kind of black belt in martial arts of some kind. So I didn't have to look up. I mean, I know nothing about martial arts, but so when we came to the martial arts scene, he'd say, "Oh yeah, well, we'll do this Bruce Lee, you know, blah 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 blah." And I think when you've got people who really know what they're talking about, you know, it's the writer's golden rule that so many writers do break. But you've got to know what you're talking about. We have a successful series here on 2000 AD, Future War series, Rogue Trooper, which was originally created and writer created by Jerry Finley Day. Now, he'd been in the army. Okay. Now, I don't think editorial really gave that enough respect. But the readers did. The readers knew that when the characters were moving and talking, this was by someone, you know, who'd been in the army and had some experience of what it was like. And so yeah, that's the golden rule, really. So that would be my six writers of SpaceWarp, if they got those kind of backgrounds.
Sounds good, man. And by the way, yeah, Rogue Trooper, truly never get a chance to talk to Dave, but I've talked to Dave Gibbons a lot about his time on Rogue Trooper, and it really was always one of my favorite features of 2000 AD. So I'm with you. Jakiro says he wants you to know that you were great in the 2000 AD documentary. Agreed. Future shock. Never lose the fire inside of you. Well, clearly, we're seeing evidence of it now with his excitement and enthusiasm for what he's doing with SpaceWarp. So definitely. And then I don't know if you've ever met Dean Haspiel, Pat. He's a great cartoonist here in the States. And yeah, Simon Fraser is one of his former studio mates. So he alerted him to SpaceWarp. So
right.
Simon's a great guy. I know Simon as well. We've talked many times in the past. He's a good guy. So
I think Simon may be in Shift. I think maybe I'm not sure. I think he's connected with, or maybe I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So anyway, and again, I love our tangents and what we've been talking about, but I do want people to know about the features themselves. So Leah, let's go from left to right. Let's talk about SF1 first. Tell us about that feature.
Okay, so well, SF1 is a story I actually had in the back of my mind since ABC Warriors, because
cool.
When I did ABC Warriors, I thought, well, that's a pretty cool title. And like you do, you kind of sit around and you think, maybe I can beat it with another title. And I came up with SF1, which stands for Special Forces 1. And then I thought, nah, I'm not gonna give it to 2000 AD. I'm gonna sit on it. So I sat on it for several decades, and so that's where the name comes from. SF1, and so it's that classic thing of a group of different characters, sort of dirty dozen, if you like, except in this case there's 6 of them. I think you've got 2 aliens, 2 robots, and 2 grunts. So they're all working together. And the world they were in was quite important, because it had to have the right subtext. And so the war they're up against, I feel okay about the trashing the enemy, because the enemies are giant macrobes. So the only film I can think of that's really gone anywhere near this would be Fantastic Voyage from way back when. You know, I mean,
Raquel Welch, Stephen Bond, absolutely. Oh no, he's back in the Twilight Zone. We'll get it. He'll clean up in a second. We'll wait for you to come back, Pat. It's all right. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
And so the idea of this kind of biology.
I'm going to make you start again, Pat.
With all, yeah.
Hold on, because yeah, you're still, we'll get there. I feel bad, man. Wi-Fi's messing with you in Spain, obviously, but eventually it'll clear up. I hope you can hear me.
That's fine.
I'll know when you're. Okay, there you go. All right, yeah. Start again, please.
Okay.
So the macro. There we go.
You can see the pages there, I hope.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed.
And so what we've got are these creatures who are like Daleks, and they're called the Virax, and they regard human beings as bacteria, and they are bacteria eaters.
That's great.
And the depressing thought, I believe, which I can't remember the exact percentage, but in the story it says it, I believe that we are apparently 55% bacteria and only 45% human. So this galactic council has decided, hey, you guys, your history, your bacteria, you have no human rights because you are 55% bacteria. So we have, I feel quite affronted by that. And it's really, I think there's a lot of comical possibilities in it, because you've got this idea that the Earth was first populated by microbes, microscopic life.
Yeah.
And then it developed from there. So the bad news for us is they want their planet back.
I like it. That's outstanding.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. All right, let's move on. And of course, Jurassic Punks. I mean, kind of self-explanatory, but I like the idea of that.
Yeah, that's Dinosaur Armageddon in Liverpool, and that was a lot of the fun of this, really. And I've got to do. I mean, I do have connections with Liverpool, and my wife studied in Liverpool and so on. So I'm not completely out on a limb, but I've really got to get that whole Liverpool accent and everything. I've got to do a little bit of training, shall we say. Yeah, maybe I have to go up there. But anyway, the idea is Liverpool is an incredible city. And as you know, in American comics, all too often it will tend to be New York that gets the apocalypse, the Armageddon, or maybe San Francisco, or maybe LA, and just occasionally Chicago, perhaps. But yeah, but other places tend to miss out, and it's the same here in the UK. So it was Liverpool. It was Liverpool's time for the dinosaurs. Okay.
That's awesome. I wonder if they're Beatle fans. I do the, when we always think of the Liverpool accent, we always think of, either Lennon or McCartney, pretty much, and those kind of either the high pitched voice of McCartney or the low pitch of Lennon and stuff. So, at least again, that's especially being a radio guy, whenever I would, do the Beatle thing, it would either be, it'd either be the high Paul or the low John, and it would be that kind of. So that's my
and there's a spectrum in between that as well.
Okay.
And what I've got is we have a female lead on it.
Okay.
And so I mean I've really got to get that right. And I do check with Liverpudlians, and I'm sure I think we kind of winged it okay for the first episode. But as we go on, I'm really going to have to figure out. It's not just Liverpool, but which part of Liverpool does she come from? Do you know what I mean? It's
okay. Yeah.
These things become important as you go. I mean, it'd be like Chicago.
You're right.
If you had a hero in Chicago, I suspect you might say, yeah, but which part?
You're absolutely right. There's a difference between the north side and the south side, just like the city of Boston. Absolutely. And also Liverpool's a port city, right? Isn't it on the water?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's great for the dinosaurs. And
they come through from the other side of the kind of like an estuary from Birkenhead. There's a warp dimension, and they've all crossed over. And yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and we obviously feature the well-known buildings in Liverpool, like
sure.
Paddy's Wigwam is the most famous. This cathedral.
Okay,
so we have to have a dinosaur standing on top of it, roaring triumphantly.
That's outstanding, man. That's great. And again, what is so terrific is, and this was always what was great about 2000 AD, just countless different features and ideas. And again, you were one of the main creatives over there. So coming up with these things that are familiar but also brand new, and I think that's great. So then you've got, is it Executioners?
Yep. Now that's the that one is about future cops, and they're having to track down kind of aliens within. And
are they posing as humans? Is it
yeah. So it's very much a kind of Blade Runner kind of context on that.
Sure.
And it's all there on the SpaceWarp website, and I think it'll probably take a couple of episodes for the readers to really interact with it. But they have the Schrödinger test from the Schrödinger's cat. And there's various ways where you can tell whether someone's an alien or not. And I really wanted to get into a little bit of the kind of quantum physics of things. I have a bit of fun with quantum theories. These aliens are vibrating at a different level to us, and so on. So they're able to get away with this. And this is why our heroes, the Executioners, they have this special equipment and everything to track them down. And I think it's got a little bit of homage there to Blade Runner, maybe martial law, maybe Judge Dredd, all those kind of things.
That's awesome. What is the URL for the website for SpaceWarp? Is it spacewarp.com? What is it?
SpaceWarpcomic.com.
All right, I'm creating a banner to put under us, so people will know where to go for more information. There it is, spacewarpcomic.com. I hope I spelled it right. Looks like it.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And on that subject, there's a free story they can download.
Oh, great!
It's a future shock story called Branded, by a British artist, now American, Clifford Cumber, whose work you may or may not know. But Branded is very, very cool. It's about this kind of what do you call it, a 2001 Space Odyssey kind of story. So cool. That's that's on the site, and I think all we want in return is your join our mailing list. And
that's great.
Yeah.
So there you go, everybody. Spacewarp.com. You get a free Future Shock, and you'll get alerts of upcoming issues and news about SpaceWarp. So if we continue, then we got, of course, Slayer. So that's cool. I mean, that's I'm so right. Isn't this your back to your character and everything, Slayer? Or?
Yeah, Slayer. Well, Slayer is he's how would I describe him? It presses that button that Games Workshop do with that kind of future war stories, and then also Nemesis and Torquemada, that kind of humans in this instant are intending to convert humans. They're sending out missionaries. They're not killing them as in Nemesis, but they're intending to convert them. And this actually came about because I read this quote that the Vatican have an observatory in Arizona, and the head of the I think he's Father Corbally, a Jesuit. It's run by Jesuits, and he said quite innocently, or rather, I don't think he was aware of, what a breathtaking comment it was, that if the aim of this observatory, which is really high end, is to find alien life, and if they can find it, to find a way to convert them and bring the Christian message to them. And I'm thinking, I really shouldn't be reading something like this.
That's awesome.
This is great story fodder for me. So that was the original inspiration for this story. And Slayer is he's a kind of very, very sophisticated robot who obviously is trying to stop all this. And he's using some very advanced systems. In fact, let me just turn to a page or two.
That'd be great, man.
I think that's not bad. And this is by artist James Newell.
Hold it a little over your head, Pat, because all we're getting is the byline right now. There you go.
Right. Okay. How's that?
The alien. Yeah. Maybe in a little more to your left or whatever, but yeah.
A little bit more to my left.
There you go. There's the alien. Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. Wow. That looks great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and he's really got that feeling for that kind of. It's not Star Wars exactly. It's kind of, but it's got that kind of galactic empire quality that I think we all of us love, and we. So the humans are the bad guys. Well, they really had to be, didn't they? I mean, Darth Vader onwards, etc.
Sure.
So
that's cool. Here, let's see, because I want to finish the characters and then go back to a couple comments that we're getting in questions. So Hellbreaker is next.
Yeah.
Tell me about Hellbreaker.
Okay. Well, these characters. I'll just show you this page as well. Okay.
Yep. Great page. Beautiful.
Yeah. This guy, basically, everyone who's been in hell, because of the space war, this is the unifying theme of all the stories, they've escaped from hell. And they're in our zone, and of course they're known as infernals, and you can't kill them because they've already suffered enough. I mean, they're already burning for all eternity, so you can't do anything to them. So obviously there's all the apparatus to try and control these creatures. And I mean, if you think about it, you have vampires, werewolves, ghouls maybe, but no one's actually done infernals before. You know, these guys have come from hell, and not, as you saw from an image of him, not only is he, you know, he's got used to burning for all eternity. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if you keep feeling a pain forever, at some point, you can't, it can't hurt them anymore.
Yeah, it's not, they're numb to it. Absolutely. They're desensitized. Absolutely. I'm with you.
Now, this guy, the other thing with him, of course, is not only is he hot, I mean, you can see him on both pages.
Yes.
Have I got that right there, roughly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Not only is he hot in one sense, but he's hot in another sense as well. He has hosts of admirers. You know, he's the one who's the influencer. In other words, he has lots of big female following and probably big guy following as well.
He's got charisma.
Yeah,
so he's an enticer as well as a you know, enforcer. So that's great.
And it raises questions about you know, the nature of hell, and you know, hell in this reality is based on well, you know, an American maximum security prison. I mean, they look pretty rough, you know. Okay. So they've all escaped from there. They've come through the warp, and people are trying to deal with them, and they're thinking, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this problem? And the fact that he's this influencer on Instagram, and he's got this huge following, so we've got to really sort this guy out.
That sounds great, man. And then finally, we have is it how do you say that? Is that mutant?
Mutant.
Oh, like mutant. Okay.
Yeah, standing for like future mutant, and the inspiration behind that, really, well, the future mutants are a product of the warp. In other words, they're affected by it. Okay. But I wanted to cover two things, really. First of all, I'm a huge fan of crazy boarding schools. You know, I mean, not just the Harry Potter ones, but there's many before that and many after it. Sure. So this is an example of it, and you can see it there in space. Yes. Right. And so you can see, you know, this is a school for future mutants, and if you fail your grades, you are history. You are, you know. Oh wow. Okay. So it's a mean school, and the headmaster obviously has to be pretty damn mean, and there he is. He's this guy here. Okay. Lord Drogheda. Sure. I mean, who would want him for a headmaster? So it kind of covers that, and then it covers the hero's later years, and he thinks back to his childhood. And when he's a child, he'll be thinking ahead to his adulthood, because I like the interplay between those two ideas. You know, how much of the child is left within us. And so the two elements will be sort of running in parallel, because I didn't want it to just be a boarding school story. I mean, that would probably be too easy, but also it's been done a lot. You know what I mean? Sure. Not just after Harry Potter, but there's lots of stories where, you know, school for spies, school for whatever.
Well, even Python in Meaning of Life, one of my favorite sections is when they're at the boarding school, and John Cleese is the headmaster and stuff, and just all the silliness. And did you go to a boarding school like that yourself?
It feels like I did. I was a day boy, but I was a day boy at a boarding school, so I knew a little bit of what these the boarders went through. Yeah, I mean, and I think there is something about those. It's probably particularly bad in Britain, but I'm sure you've got your well, you do have your equivalent in the States. I think they're more like boot camps, aren't they? Where they send difficult kids to sort them out,
right? Or they are rich prep schools that So it is a smaller bit of the population that has that experience. But you're right.
It's not as commonplace, and I mean it does come under a lot of criticism, because I mean you can have kids as young as say 6 or 7 in Britain anyway, who leave mum and dad behind. They're suddenly in this strange environment, and yet at the same time, paradoxically, they're the most popular stories that kids love reading, and always have, long before Harry Potter. You could go back to Angela Brazil, who used to write girls boarding school stories about 100 years ago, and they've got that same vibe. It's something to do with that kind of secret community of kids who are kind of defending themselves against awful adults.
100%, man. And really, even more so, like those kinds of schools also had sort of a religious background, whether it was Jesuit or Catholic or whatever. So yeah, I can appreciate that. Dean has another great comment. And again, Dean has worked for Marvel, but also really does a lot of his own creator-owned stuff. And he says, I wish you the greatest success with SpaceWarp, but in the current comic culture, anthologies are increasingly difficult to launch and sustain. How is 2000 AD and Judge Dredd magazine able to sustain monthly publication?
Well, Judge Dredd magazine is monthly. 2000 AD is weekly. As far as I know, I think they're at a certain steady level. You know what I mean? In other words, their audience isn't falling away. And I mean, I'm not privy to any insider information, but I would guess that in an odd kind of way, COVID has probably helped, because it probably boosted sales for a while. Now, of course, now we're all getting out, that may be different. So I think, I don't think they're breaking records anymore. And it's fair to say that they've lost, they lost them a while ago. The youth audience, we lost the youth audience somewhere in the 1990s, and it wasn't so much with the comic growing up. I think it was actually to do with losing our way. In other words, there was a lot. You will find, if you talk to people about 2000 AD, the common phrase used is, oh, I gave up on 2000 in 1996. I didn't like it anymore. And sometimes they'll be more precise about why. But I think in general terms, it lost its way. So I think where SpaceWarp is concerned, we're trying to reach that youth audience, that obviously a new generation, and and they are tough to reach. They're no pushover. But we've had very good feedback from the young readers we've reached. But half the thing, of course, is reaching them. Now, you see, in years gone by, long before COVID, as it were, you had the playground grapevine. So a kid would come along and say, "Hey, I've just read this great comic," and they're saying, "Hey, where'd you get it?" Newsstand. And so it all goes around the playground. Or if it's a not so cool comic, you say, "Oh God, you're not reading that. That's crap," etc., etc. But I think so. It's locking into the equivalent of that, and we went down a number of roads. We spent quite a lot of time researching this, and we found what, in retrospect, whenever you come to any kind of conclusion and this think, that was bleeding obvious. Did you really need to spend 8 weeks figuring that out? But I think we found, for the most part, that although we could reach an audience on Instagram, the way that generation responds most is to influencers, and of course word of mouth as well. But you haven't got that with 2000 AD, I'm sure a lot of its initial sales were down to word spreading around the playground. So I suppose it's the equivalent now with a mobile phone. So that's where we're at, and we are making a concerted effort to reach that audience. So we'll see how it goes.
Do you mind? I'm interested if you're willing to divulge your method of research. I mean, I mean, do you have kids in a focus group sitting down with the book? Yeah.
Well, the equivalent of it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got in touch with a number of 2000 AD fans who we knew had kids of the right age, and we got their feedback. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And we also had a punk school, a guy who was an ex-punk, who was a really, I hope I'm going to pronounce his name correctly, Gwynap Harry. And, you know, he has a very alternative way of looking at things. And so we got feedback from some of his school.
Cool.
And then there's other areas we're doing as well. One of the Futant stories we've had illustrated by art students. And so it's interesting to see what they're drawing and what they like or don't like, you know, or, where's their energy. So that's useful for research.
Sure.
And one part of the feedback we got back from those sources was that price is still an important factor, because
I get it. Go on.
I mean, price-wise, this is okay for an adult.
Sure.
I think it's 10 or 11 pounds, something like that. But I mean, especially compared to, I mean, you have lots of 2000 AD collections where they're, I don't know, 14, 15 pounds, similar, $16, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
So we thought price-wise we were okay. But our feedback was, if you want to really reach a lot of kids, you need to do something about the price. And so that's why we were really pleased that we had this deal with Shift, that we could come down to a $5. And we hope that will reach them. And one of the things is you have to give each stage time. So we will have a sort of post-mortem on it. We won't just say, oh, that worked or it didn't work. We want to study their letters, you know, see what they have to say.
Sure.
Get the subtext of what they're saying. And we, you know, I'm not sure we can bring the price down any lower. Maybe we can do a cheaper digital one that's even lower still. But I think that works for the States. But in the UK, there's resistance to digital. You guys are much more accommodating. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I do I have this series Requiem, which comes out in Comixology and also under our own kind of banner, and it's 11 volumes of
wow.
And the artwork on it is wonderful, very French, very beautiful artwork, wildly over the top, and very sexy because it's French, of course. So it's for, and let me see. I think it's fair to say that about 75% of our digital sales on it are in the States. You know, most Brits say, no, I'm going to hold on for the paper edition.
Interesting. Yeah. Because honestly, I find myself leaning more towards the digital product. Never thought I would. And I will admit that sometimes it is price is a factor. And especially the American monthly magazines are, you know, at $5 for 20 pages. And it's like, man, I you know, again, I go back when it was under $1, and I'm showing my age. I'm 56, will be 56. But yeah, it's like, I don't know, man, that's kind of pricey to me. Yeah, I don't know, and again, I do think SpaceWarp, both as digital and paper, it is a good buy, and I think it's $9 digitally here on Amazon, in American dollars, and I think that's great. But no, I can appreciate that, and again, the level of research, you want to put it in the right hands, and I don't blame you, and I think that's smart. Is that because you are looking at numbers and stuff? When does issue 2 come out?
Well, we were surprised at how long those 4 extra pages on the newsstand took. But I've been working these last few months on my new book, which is on Slain, Kiss My Axe, the secret history of Slain the Warped Warrior. I haven't got a cover for you yet. Okay, well, there's Slain, yeah, definitely.
There's an example of Slain, absolutely. So
Slain's been running for 40 years, and the last series, which is illustrated by Leo Manco, I think is exceptionally good, and that comes out as a collected edition from memory, I think, around about September or October.
Hey, that's awesome. Great.
But it's 40 years, and I decided it was time for Slain to hang up his axe there.
Wow.
So I wanted to write a kind of, just as I did with Be Pure, the secret history of 2000 AD, I wanted to do the secret history of Slain. So it's very much in that same tradition. Lots of things I shouldn't be saying, and will probably get told off for saying.
So is it kind of meta? Are you doing both a narrative story and then also the behind the scenes of Slain, or is it just a book about?
It's just a book about.
Oh, that's awesome.
In other words, how did it start?
Yeah.
How did it survive for 40 years against the odds? Who were the great artists? Like Bisley and Clint Langley, and as I say, the latest artist, Leo Manco. You probably know him from Hellraiser. Hellblazer. Yeah,
John Constantine. Sure.
Yeah, and he's done a fantastic job on it, and so there's lots of stories about that and the whole Celtic mythology and so on. But anyway, that's been taking me taking up the slack, if you like. But once that's out of the way, and that should be, I think we'll probably have that out probably in September.
Okay.
And then I can switch to SpaceWarp 2. But also by then, I will have a clearer idea of what's the feedback from these younger readers as well. And then we'll be all systems go, I hope. That's the plan anyway.
Pat, I'm so glad that you're doing that, and it's great to hear that you're doing that. Here with of course Slain, because I loved the secret history, as you say, 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave. A great book, and as I was telling you off the air, I'm so glad you did the narration for the audiobook. That's great. When the Slain volume comes out, I please come back, because I would love to talk to you about that. And truly, both of these books, I really, and the Slain book to come in September, it is so great that you are getting your version, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but your story of what you're doing, like how you saw things evolve at 2000 AD with Slain, and really your career. I really think those kind of firsthand accounts are so valuable. And a lot of fans, we have our impressions of how things went, and we really need to know the real story, or we want to know the real story.
Yeah,
and truly,
because I think I think fans' views are, for the most part, pretty accurate. They kind of get the feeling, they don't. And I think actually more and more that we need more transparency in comics anyway. I have no idea what it's like with Marvel and DC. I suspect, like with most comic publishers, they think they're the Vatican. Everything's all secret. But it's I like the idea of interacting with the audience. You know, I don't subscribe to this pyramid view of things, you know, where the publishers are at the top or whatever. I see it as interacting with the audience. So I want to know what audiences like. And, you know, if we get it wrong on some things, I don't have a problem saying, well, we screwed up there, you know. And I think it's so much better to do that than to be very guarded. But my general sense of British comics and American comics is that they're like in a fortress, you know. They're like, no, we have no comment to make here.
You're right.
But I think transparency makes fans more amenable and more sympathetic to what's going on.
I completely agree. Obviously, and you know this, since Disney acquired Marvel, since DC became a very important IP farm for the television and film product, everyone is territorial, and there are non-disclosures and all of that nonsense. I mean, and in fact, I believe in our last conversation about the Dread television series, you had even told me on the record, you know, some things about just behind the scenes kind of stuff of those kinds of moves. And I respect that, and I get that. That's okay. But I also hope that eventually, after time and after the movie and TV show have been out for years, that some people can come forward and tell us what happened. We're curious. As you say, it only makes us more of a fan if we, you know, if we see the process. And it's not to shit on something and be trolly about it, but we're just curious. Hey, how did it come about? What was part of the creative moves? What business decisions prohibited creative moves? I mean, a lot of times, as Orson Welles used to say, it was the limitations that caused the happy accidents that made some of the great moments in his films. And it's like, it's true. When you have limitations, that is when your creativity kicks in and is like, all right, well, what can I do within these guidelines and stuff?
Yeah, it's the innovations behind it. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like working for Disney. I mean, many years ago, I remember being given a contract, a Disney contract.
Really?
One of their comedy comics. This was a long, long time ago. They wouldn't be offering me one today. I remember looking at all the, but it actually laid out all the bit I remember distinctly. This I imagine it's still the case. You can't make, it wasn't so much woke as taking there was no comedy to be gained from the normal areas. You can't make jokes about figures of authority. You can't have jokes about old people. You can't make jokes about that, you know. And I mean, okay, in some ways you could say its time has come, you know, like contractors. But it was like, well, where does the humor come from? And I think there was there was a general disapproval of satire, which reminds me that there was a point a few years back where the guy who The Rock was interested in martial law, and our concerns was that he had first look at Disney, and we were really frightened that if Disney got their hands on it, they might have just taken martial law just to get rid of it, get it off the market. In other words, kind of this filth out.
That's funny. I was going to make a joke when you said you had a contract at Disney. I'm like, yeah, martial law and Mickey Mouse, great crossover. I don't think so. I don't think Mickey would be interested in that. He's gonna watch his pants very carefully. So
yeah, they're very serious chaps. And I think that's the thing that comes back to what we were saying earlier with Warren Comics and Mad Magazine and so on. And before that, this wonderful, proud tradition you have of underground comics, you know, for not just Crumb, but all the others as well.
Absolutely.
And to me, I always thought comics were subversive. So when I first started in the industry, I thought, hey, this speaks to my soul. You know, this this is a subversive industry. It's not rock and roll, but it's a, you know, it's a kind of cousin, you know.
Absolutely, man. Hell yeah.
And so I think I found recent developments all over the place, really like a kind of covert, creeping authoritarianism, and thinking, I don't know, this isn't what I signed up for, you know.
Yeah, these IPs are more valuable to them as greeting cards and bed sheets and birthday cakes and, you know, product rather than the stories. And yeah, unfortunately, that sometimes will, you know, cut down on what you could do from a parody standpoint, or even a violent standpoint, a sexual standpoint. Good Lord, you might have seen in the headlines when the Harley Quinn cartoon wanted to have a scene, and it's an adult cartoon of, forgive me, Batman going down on Catwoman, and the powers that be saying, no, here our heroes don't go down. And it's like,
yeah, I read that.
Really?
Really? My God.
Here we are, you know, I mean, again, and everyone, and thankfully most of the audience is like, I think, you know, half the population might disagree, and that's not very heroic if they're not doing that. But yeah, exactly, man. I mean, and this is where we are. Or when they took Wolverine, in a lighter sense, when they took Wolverine's cigar away from him in the X-Men. Oh, we can't have that smoking. Oh, no. Come on. Jesus. Whatever. What are you going to do? I don't blame you, Pat. I mean, and again, thank God you're making your own stuff. So,
well, hey, I think that's why I've had to because I felt really that creatively, you know, you reach a point where there's no point in moaning about things and saying, oh, well, this should be better and so on. You know, there's only one thing to do, which is go out and do it yourself and prove that it can be done, and prove that there is an alternative. And, you know, I mean, I think the only thing that a downside of it, but everything does take time, because as I say, there's only two of us. So, but it's also exciting because, you know, you're having to learn new skills, you know, like marketing and lots of other, you know, presentation skills that normally I wouldn't worry about.
Sure.
So you really get to see the whole picture. It's a much more holistic approach. But the one thing we've certainly found is that self-publishing works, and I think a lot of creators go in for crowdfunding. We've never gone down that road because we really wanted to get a market response, and we felt that, yeah, you know, if we had, I mean, we'd be very grateful for them, you know, these kind of Patreon or crowdfunders or whatever, but we wanted to see, it's got to work at the sharp end. It's got to work at street level. And I would say from the various books we've had out, it does work. And there's still stuff we can learn, and there's still ways we can get better. But it does work. So that's encouraging.
That's excellent, man. Can I throw a couple final questions from the
Yeah, please do.
Excellent. All right, here we go. First of all, again, Dean's like, hey, you're a bona fide legend. Agreed. He thanks you for your outrageous commitment to comics. Thanks for answering all of his questions, and may SpaceWarp bend the minds of the young and the restless. And Ramsey has a good question. Grant Morrison talks about how much UK girls comics influenced him and how they were more sophisticated than boys comics. Do you think they were more subversive?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was responsible for quite a lot of them. Yeah, I'll just give a short answer there. The psychological cruelty in girls' comics transcended anything you will see in Lobo by Simon Bisley. You know what I mean? The mental cruelty of, you know, it's that kind of stuff that you see in a film like Mean Girls or things like that. And we would do the kind of girls' comic equivalent, minus the adult elements, the sexual elements, but sure, things like Gone Girl, In other words, Gone Girl is about a very kooky lady. So we would find the equivalent of that. And so I'm delighted to see. I hadn't realized that Grant was into girls comics, and they are, it took years and years because there's a whole stack of these girls comics. There's a whole archive. But of course, it's like anything. If you were to go to a Marvel or DC archive, if you don't know the right comics, you can't just shovel them into a printing machine and reprint them. You've got to know the right ones. And that's true for girls comics, because with some of them you think, oh my God, that's embarrassing. And some of them are embarrassing, just as any other comics are meant to be a bit embarrassing. And but the ones that are good, they are really, really good. And in recent years, Rebellion has started reprinting them. They have started reprinting some of those classics. I don't know that they've really necessarily picked some of what I would regard as some real classics, but I hope they do eventually, because I mean, you're talking about some brilliant artists as well. And I think you did have a girls' comic tradition, but it was a long time ago. I think it was the 1940s, 1950s, wasn't it? Something like that.
Oh, for the States, that's funny. I'm going to be at a convention at the end of the month in Connecticut, and this woman who worked for DC in the 60s, Barbara Freelander, I guess Simon and Kirby, actually, of all people, kind of started the romance comic in that late 40s, early 50s period. But this woman, Barbara Freelander, was an editor at DC and for the romance comics of DC in the 60s. I love talking to her because you're right. And also some of those artists were so great and wouldn't do superhero comics. A guy named J. Scott Pike was an incredible cover and interior artist, and he would only do the girls comics, and they were beautiful. They're amazing. But John Romita and and now I'm blanking, Vinny Coletta. Vinny Coletta is vilified for erasing Jack Kirby lines for getting the job done as the inker. And I always am like, yeah, but meanwhile, he was one of the great good girl artists, and his Wonder Woman run and a lot of the romance comics, and John Romita Sr. would do beautiful romance comics. Yeah, you're right. And really, a lot of the superhero fans, they don't realize this untapped world of just beautiful comic book art. The stuff that Roy Lichtenstein would take the panel and turn into big pop art and stuff. And what an asshole, by the way, for really.
Yeah. And of course, that's why with that cover of Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave, that's actually saying, it's actually saying, thank you, Mr. Lichtenstein. You took from comics. Now I'm taking back something at our end,
Absolutely, man.
And the same with Kiss My Axe, the forthcoming one. Again, that Lichtenstein thing. Because my original idea, as you mentioned, I feel exactly the same. When I started 2000 AD, I said to the art editor, I said, look, there's this guy Lichtenstein who's been lifting stuff from comics. Let's make the covers like Lichtenstein. Absolutely. And my art editor said to me, well, I've never heard of Lichtenstein. And I said, well, okay, I'll get you a book of his stuff so you can see. Now, this is obviously pre-internet. And so I went along to the library to get one of these deluxe color books.
Sure.
And they've been stolen by bloody students.
Oh, wow. Oh, man.
So I had the awful task of describing to my art. He said, well, what's Lichtenstein like? And it's not like you can go online and find this stuff. So I tried describing Lichtenstein, and that's why all the early 2000 AD covers look like a sort of a kind of Lichtenstein knockoff, but without the black dots.
Right, the Bandai, I believe, isn't that?
Yeah, they haven't quite got it. Because obviously my drawing skills were not up to explaining. But yeah, I think it's, as you say, that whole Oh Brad thing. I mean, that's a classic Lichtenstein, and yes. It's good to claim it back.
That's funny. Now Ramsey also, first of all, he says Ella of Easy Street was great. That one I've never heard
Ella
of.
on Easy Street, I won't talk about it all night. I won't even talk about it for 2 minutes. I will talk about it for 1 minute and say it was absolutely brilliant. And Ramsey, the fact that you're mentioning it, I don't know whether Rebellion have reprinted it or whether you've got hold of it from some old comic, but if I tell you who the artist is, it may mean something to you. The artist was Casanovas, who was a really famous girls comic artist, and his stuff was almost had a kind of Disney quality about it, had a dreamy feeling. And Ella on Easy Street, instead of, I mean, the thing that's so seditious, and I doubt anyone would touch it today, but this was the era we lived in, that normally with all stories, particularly American stories, it's always about getting onwards and upwards, right? Going better. In other words, we're going to get to the top, right? Yes. Well, this is a British story, right? So she's Ella as in Cinderella, and she's saying, I don't want to be a success. I'm happy. My family is successful now because we're a happy family. So I don't want Dad to go to night school and better himself. I don't want Mum to work all hours. And so she's sabotaging the whole family from being yuppies or whatever the modern word is. And it's such a brilliant idea. And in my fantasies, I can always imagine sometime trying to say this to a Hollywood producer. So there's this story about this girl. She doesn't want success. And just seeing that kind of dazed look on a producer's face.
And boy, I'll tell you, I'm just really going by the title because I keep meaning to sit down and watch Fleabag. I haven't done it yet. Yeah. But would Fleabag, I mean, that's the thing. Maybe with shows like that, maybe there is a venue for that kind of comic. It
has that British Fleabag is brilliant.
I keep hearing that. Yes, go on.
It has other things as well. There was a British film that came out in the 60s, which you may not have heard of, called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner.
No, please.
In that film, it was a classic in its day. So the guy, normally it'd be like Chariots of Fire, where he's going to win, the big race against all the odds,
I love
right?
that movie, by the way.
So he's in this race and is against all the odds, and he just flunks it. He deliberately flunks it. And you imagine trying to sell that to a Hollywood producer. But in its day, I mean, I remember seeing that as a young teenager. And I thought, wow, what a message. What a subversive message. I don't think I've recovered to this day. I think that's why I still write the stuff I do. Because it was like saying, you don't have to be this success machine. You don't have to drive yourself crazy. That you can have, there's another way of looking at things. And Ella on Easy Street. So yeah, if Grant Morrison saw that story, I'm sure it would crop up in his work somewhere.
That's cool. Ramsey says, by the way, he wrote one of Rebellion's New Girl comics.
Hey,
so that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Good that Rebellion. It's good that you've got. Thank God you've read Ella on Easy Street, because that way you're obviously going to be pressing a seditious note rather than because there were some very what should we say
Pollyanna
story, Pollyanna kind of things. There were some of them there,
sure,
but that isn't what. Who wants to see that kind of stuff? I mean, we want to see Mean Girls, don't we?
Right. I remember years ago, about 15 years ago or so, Alan Moore talking to Stuart Lee on that old BBC radio show Chain Reaction, and Alan brought up the blind ballerina and all the tortures that the writers would put the blind ballerina in and everything. So,
that's a whole strata of dark comedy, which Kevin O'Neill and I mind a bit. The whole thing of I mean, for a start, there used to be all these stories, some of which we would be horrified in today's woke generation that there's a girl with big feet who was a great swimmer. So she was called Flipper Feet. And then you had another story with a character called Limp Along Lindy. I mean, you know, you could not.
Good luck. Yeah.
Stories like that could be, I don't know, they were in a different world of their own.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
This is why Grant is absolutely correct. You could get away with all sorts of things in girls' comics that you couldn't possibly do in boys' comics. And as I say, the subtle cruelty was far worse than, you know, Lobo's the pussycat by comparison.
That's awesome. That's fair. Grant, pardon me, Pat, as always, truly, I love where the conversation went. I love the things that we covered. Most importantly, we want people to pick up the first issue of SpaceWarp. Go to the website, spacewarpcomic.com. I'll put the banner back up once again and remind people, because you'll also get an extra feature shock, and sign up for the newsletter because you'll be alerted to what Pat is doing and his new projects. And yeah, man, when the Slayer book comes out, please come back because I really look forward to talking about that more, and also your novels. And we've talked briefly about those in the past, but also get more into the secret history behind 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, and more stories like that from the man who knows, the man who knows where all the bodies are buried. Pat Mills. It's truly always a pleasure, Pat. I really appreciate you coming on this evening.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That's fantastic.
And thanks everybody for watching. Later tonight, Pat will be in bed likely because this will be about 6 hours from now. I'll be talking to Steve Orlando about some of his current comics. And tomorrow, really excited, I'll be talking to Ron Mars. And then late night, very late night, Kinescope. We're doing a look at the early days of live television, myself and Gabe Hardman, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's what's in store for the rest of the week on Word Balloon Live. I hope you'll join us. Until then, be safe,